What ingredient ruins a sandwich for you? Warm wet lettuce on hot sandwiches. A few years ago, the sub shop in the grocery store near me started doing cheeseburger subs. Usually the quality of the sandwiches was very good to outstanding. There's an open secret that they partnered with an old-time Italian deli in our city to get recipes when they first started doing subs. So anyway, I figure I'd give the cheeseburger a shot since they were advertising it. The sub guy opens the bread, grabs two burger patties from what I thought was a warming tray, goes down the line for my toppings. I did lettuce, tomato, a little mayo, onion, pickles. He puts the whole sandwich together, wraps it in the paper, cuts it, then before I can realize what's happening, puts the whole goddamn sandwich in the microwave and heats it up because the patties are stored cooked and chilled. I hope they got there together. I wouldn't know because that was the last cheeseburger sub one ever ordered from them. Oh my FVCK god, finally. I try and explain the two people and they just don't fucking get it. They say stupid like, will you like to eat salads? Yeah. Well, that's because the salad lettuce is ice cold. It's not warm, wilted, and leaking water everywhere that vaguely tastes like lettuce and contaminates every other taste in the dish. That's a rather unfortunate side effect of restaurant service. If you order a burger or something, usually the whole plate is made and placed under the heat lamp to keep the burger, fries warm. If they're smart, they'll put it open face with the top bun and the veggie stack away from the light, which will be fine for a couple minutes, but if it's super busy and the window is full and the waitresses are running behind, you're gonna get warm lettuce. Mealy tomatoes. Sounds like something someone who never ate good tomatoes would say. I live in Turkey where there are really nice tomatoes available, not on the same level as Italy or Spain, but my mother has them in her garden, and they're always a treat. Wraps or burgers without tomatoes always feel lacking to me. Tomatoes add so much acidity, juiciness, and the right texture and taste. Nothing like picking a good tomato off the vine, warm from the sun, biting into it, and it exploding in your mouth. Makes my mouth water right here and now. My mom is an all-natural organic gardener who sells her veggies at a premium cost to locals. She has done my whole life. I love radishes and rutabagas and kale and dragon fruit and persimmons and all kinds of weird stuff that come from their farm. But tomatoes, never, not unless cooked or processed. People like to say that if you don't like tomatoes, it just means you haven't had a good one. No, for people like me, raw tomato tastes like slimy, nasty dirt. Whether fresh off the vine, organic, from an expensive store. Slimy, disgusting dirt. It's insane how many people will tell me that my hatred of raw tomato comes from I've never tasted a fresh, organic one. Nope, they are just revolting to me. And I've eaten them fresher than most people ever have. It's just a me thing. It's hard to explain to most people who enjoy raw tomato. The closest I can say is that we all enjoy grape, right? The texture is there. But instead of getting sweet and a little bitter if there's seeds in the grape, what you get with a tomato is rot. It tastes like eating a fruit that's rotted. The texture bursts in your mouth and it's foul like a grave. You cook it and that goes away. But it's been tough to tell my mill and other friends that no, tomato fresh from the garden literally tastes like decay to me. I can't eat it without puking. I refer to those as tomatoes. They look like tomatoes, but they are tasteless and the mealy texture completely ruins them. These are usually the green ripe tomatoes harvested from huge corporate farms. They are then sprayed to preserve them and make them turn red so that they appear ripe. FVCK tomatoes. Few things compare to the flavor and texture of an actual ripe tomato that goes straight from the vine to my kitchen in under a minute. Be careful what you wish for here. Enough knows, and they might try to sneak stay white powder back into the mix. A product used for decades designed to for one keep your cut lettuce or sliced julienne whatever from turning green and white to brown. Turns out it contained all kinds of neat little things like sulfites, carcinogens, and allergens. But hey, everybody was happy with their salad lol. Now slimy or brown lettuces even stay white powder can't help with that, so FVCK that. My wise uncle called iceberg lettuce the white bread. Think Wonder Bread of vegetables. Sprouts, spinach, radishes, and sliced carrots a better crunch, flavor per dime. That said, there are some good lettuce varieties out there: Boston, romaine, and even cabbages. Discovering a pepper vinaigrette coleslaw was a sandwich game changer. I one time had an older gentleman come up to my register to complain about a piece of brown lettuce. He was pissed about it, saying it was disgusting and how he wanted a refund. The kicker: he finished the food completely. So he found it disgusting enough to complain about it and ask for a refund, but not too disgusting to finish it before he complained. I would have remade or refunded it, but how the hell are you gonna call something disgusting and ask for a refund after you've already eaten all of it? Then he threatened to write a letter to the higher-ups, but I guess that got lost in the mail. Soft, cheap bread that gets soggy with the slightest bit of moisture. This is the one thing that will make me reject a sandwich with revulsion. Don't mind soggy bread, but I cannot stand hard bread that scrapes your gums and is more brittle than a cracker. One of my friends insists on bringing the hardest baguette he can find every time we go hiking, and I can never stand it. I'm from the Phillyburbs on the Jersey side, and one of the things the region does really well is bread that's both hard and soft at the same time and really holds a sandwich together. Like Philly cheesesteaks, hoagies, bagels, and if you want to stretch the definition, pizza crust. Now I've lived in other states, but I'm currently in Maryland now, and the bread here couldn't hold a damn thing if its life depended on it. It doesn't taste bad, but it's weak as FVCK. I find myself really not enjoying sandwiches unless the bread or ingredients were shipped in. I bought some long rolls at Wegmans for a brisket sandwich once, and it couldn't even handle the slightest bit of moist meat without completely falling apart. It was embarrassing. And don't even get me started on the bagels. Tease not the cheapness of a bread that makes it easily soggy. One way to prevent the bread from getting soggy is to butter it or use a thin film of mayo to create an oil barrier so the insides of the sandwich don't transfer moisture to the bread. It's not a perfect coating, but it will slow it down so it takes much longer for it to get moist. And pat dry lettuce. And don't put fresh tomato slices directly on the bread. It's about using ingredients in the right order so the wet stuff is in the middle and you add a barrier between that and the bread to keep the water content from migrating to the bread. A lot of times this is due to making and storing the sandwich improperly. Any lettuce should be dried first, and the spreads or dressing should not be spread on the bread but other contents, such as the lettuce or cheese or meat, in a manner in which it has no contact with the bread. If storing the sandwich in a plastic container in the fridge, place paper towels on the bottom of the container first to prevent condensation buildup, which will be soaked up by the bread and make it soggy. If in a packed lunch, tack the bread then contents desperately and combine them at the time of consumption. You can also do this when storing in the fridge. I'd rather have bread that is too soft than bread that is crumbling apart from being stale. I got a cheap 7-Eleven hot dog once and actually had to go back and ask if they had any other bread because the one they gave me wasn't even openable without it ripping and crumbling. It was a 7-Eleven hot dog, so it wasn't expected to be restaurant quality, but I was still kind of surprised by how bad it was. I get those hot dogs after hike sometimes as an unhealthy treat, and usually the bread is fine. The bread is the world of the sandwich. It is both the Mother Earth and Father Sky of the sandwich. It is both the fertile ground in which the flavors grow, and the protective covering to insulate it from the chaos of the universe itself. It is the essence of life for the sandwich. A poor earth and sky cannot properly protect and enhance that which it contains. Get good bread. A long time ago, in downtown Detroit, my friend's loft got a sandwich shop on the ground level, and us young with disposable income were excited to check it out. This was 2000. I can't remember the name of the place, but the menu was on of the corny "Hey, it's Detroit, let's have a bunch of car" as the menu items. We went in about 12. Prime lunchtime. We were near the Penobscot and Bricktown, if I recall. We went in and the place was dead empty. We were disturbing the peace. I ordered the Ford Assembly or some awesome sandwich. Guy was pissed off the whole time. It was like 3 servings of meat, great fresh veggies, the bread up the butt, it dogged up and was worthless. Not toasted, nothing. We felt guilty. Anyway, they went out of business after 6 weeks. In the same vein as a saying I had any time, I reveal to the uninitiated what is involved with making milk or any factory-farmed beef really by extension, as far as government-subsidized corn being primarily the cow's diet, which changes the texture, taste, and nutritional profile dramatically. I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure there are the only metrics one would go by when determining if one food is in fact the actual food it has always been, and not some sinister dollar store Manchurian candidate busted imposter. Like literally the definition of a conspiracy. They literally pulled a classic bait and switch. The most profound long con example in history, no doubt. Impressive even. Impressive, yes, but incredibly evil, and no doubt conceptualized and implemented by a complete sociopath, who figured out if you take a grazing animal literally kept on extreme, sweeping expanses of land humans used to live on in cowboy days, and realized capacity restrictions on building codes are only for humans, meaning if they didn't need to actually own 300 million and counting acres of grasslands to support his ever-expanding empire, and instead could just put every single cow and every single herd across their entire operation, and put them all in what is essentially the equivalent of the free club on the beach, with a rooftop as the venue at my local college town. Admittedly with a dash of low-key wartime death camp vibes. Although with less of the fun drugs, more of the kind that are terrible for your health to take persistently, but better than the infections you apparently will inevitably and consistently develop from the aforementioned conditions. But wait, what will they eat then? How would we bring cows their food if their home is also their food? The government subsidized corn recently, maybe cows will eat corn. Imagine the savings holy f***ing. Okay, so I mean it kind of goes without saying, if this actually works. If cows will actually eat a f***ing corn, there's no way we can not do it right. I mean Jesus ever-loving Christ Jim, look at the numbers. This was assumingly around the time somebody decided, if they stopped rotating the crops, they can just plant lots of stuff over and over that sells more. Imagine the boner they must have got from the projections on that one. Even though the crops get rotated for time immemorial, because the point of plants is kind of for nutrients. And when you don't rotate crops, the soil loses all its nutrients. What was this the norm of the day to be a comical evil capitalist, really just trying to push the boundaries for the trope? And thus, a new era began. I don't know if other countries visited America, and were obviously initially, at point of sale, masterfully played by the most sophisticated international intelligence level mastermind conman, businessman, yet as I'm sure many people noticed when they made the switch, that it literally tastes like water and has a different chemical makeup and actually different ingredients and nutrients. They probably reported back to their countries to avoid whatever it is they're calling milk in America, and to avoid whatever practices have led to such a defiled abomination. Americans probably mostly took the bait with a mere yo WTF is with the milk, but probably just thought the milk flavor changed for the worse. That happens all the time in America, right? But still bought it for utility, like for cereal and recipes. So those of us not around for the switcheroo whenever this style of farming got popular, many of us got it growing up as kids and never even know the greatest FVCK and G-Heis in human history had just been performed merely generations ago. Like in the 50s, there were milk bars PPL just hung out and drank milk and soda. Cause the was f***ing bomb, tastes like f***ing ice cream, and is a literal superfood. And then PPL can even drink whatever we're calling the Manchurian candidate cus, the lactase and is necessary for breaking down the lactose is scorched out of it, along with all the other beneficial enzymes in our often legally required modern pasteurization process, which also makes raw milk illegal in several states. Here in CA, only Sprouts carries it, from what I can see. Raw whole milk from grass-fed cows. It's $17 a gallon, but it is actual milk. Not it which has yet to be named, since they executed a perfection-level conspiracy, like they Dark Souls that. Public information now, yet doesn't appear to be very common knowledge, at least in my experience. All tomatoes. Tomato is just a food to me. It can be alright in some things like when you cook it into something, or make it into a soup or even ketchup, but just tomatoes on their own taste so FVCKING awful to me. Especially the texture. And don't even get me started on great cherry tomatoes, they're like FVCKING plumber scrack flavor gushers. I honestly have no f***ing clue what people like about them. The stems and vines of the tomato plant smell really good though. Huge pieces of meat that when I bite, instead of cutting and eating a piece, I eat the whole thing, and the rest of the sandwich is left meatless. Honestly, I hate the huge sandwich thing. Like sure, a big hoagie looks nice, but it's usually too much for one sitting, and it basically falls apart after a few bites. Give me a reasonably sized sandwich that I don't have to unhinge my jaw to eat. Also, I'm gonna say that it is possible to have too much meat. At a point, you can't even taste the different cuts when they're piled an inch thick. Had a French dip where they put chunks in. Couldn't dip without holding the meat in. Plus, due to the cuts, you get less ooze around the meat. I generally kind of dislike French dips or any kind of sandwich where you are supposed you dip it in a sauce at restaurants for this exact reason. A lot of restaurants try to be fancy and give you sandwiches with low structural integrity, since they give you chunky meats or stuff that could barely hold up when flat but would completely fall apart when you tilt it. Occasionally, the dipping cup isn't even large enough for you to be able to dunk the sandwich in the sauce. Sometimes I wonder if the restaurant staff tries to eat their own food at all. This is actually the key to making better sandwiches, is usually less or smaller sliced meat. Worked at a Subway adjacent type place for 4 years in college. Usually prep for chicken tenders was cut it in half. Best way was actually to cut it into 5, heated more evenly, and you didn't have to rip it apart with your teeth. Same goes with cheese. You don't need tons and it can overpower the sandwich. Making sure to space it out evenly resulted again in a much more consistent sandwich that didn't have just overpowering cheese sections. I feel this in my bones. Years ago, an inexperienced dental assistant filled several of my rear molars poorly, failing to grind the filling down sufficiently, making it so my top and bottom molars touch prematurely when closing my jaw. This keeps my front teeth from being able to touch, so I can't bite through thin foods completely. So whenever I bite into a sandwich filling, whether it's a thin slice of meat, lettuce, or onion, I can't actually bite through the piece, and it ends up getting yanked out in its entirety. The best I can do is try to hold the food in place with my tongue and tear it away. If the condiments is not spread right to the edges and in the corners of the bread. I never liked Subway for the longest time, and then on a road trip I agreed to go there for lunch with my boyfriend. He went first and asked the sandwich artist to put the mayo and mustard on the bread before adding any ingredients. My mind was blown, and I all of a sudden realized that was a huge part of what I didn't like about Subway. The condiments squeeze out because there's no contact with the bread for them to get absorbed a little. Game changer. Got a breakfast sandwich from Sheetz one morning, and while it still tasted good, it was awful. Every topping took up a different portion of the sandwich. Cream cheese on 1/4, pico on 1/4, guac on another, and another sauce on the last quarter. I don't know how UFVCK up a sandwich so badly. I've had the same sandwich before, but whoever made it that time had clearly never made a sandwich before that. I'm in the UK, and have had several interactions on Reddit about the infamous butter or no butter equation. Over here, we pretty much put butter on every sandwich, no matter the type, often even on sandwiches made with jelly. Jams to PB&J isn't as common as in US, but that might get a pass. Mayo is usually a secondary condiment. A lot of Americans seem to explode when I mention this. Butter is good for just this reason, because it creates a little moisture wall right to the edge of the sandwich that keeps all the juices in, especially good if you're taking the sandwich for lunch, picnic, whatever. Standing with both feet in the lettuce bins with shoes on. This gives me flashbacks to working in Yellowstone. We could get bag lunches for our days off, and most had sandwiches. Inevitably, the side touching the meat would get soggy as hell. But the climate was so dry, half the time the other slice of bread would go stale within 15 seconds of unwrapping. Terrible food, but great times. Where I live, a local specialty is steamed sandwiches. It makes the bread slightly soggy and all the ingredients kind of melt together, and it's delicious, but I can see how it's not for everyone. I also love a BLT on super soft white bread that soaks up the tomato juices until your bread turns kind of pink, but the juicy bread and crispy bacon is a heavenly combo. It may sound gross, but I grew up poor in the South, so maybe it's a whole thing. I get this, but if you ever find yourself in Chicago or suburbs, and pretty sure they have expanded to other states, try an Italian beef sandwich dip from Portillo's. This is au jus marinated roast beef in a soft hoagie-style roll Then the whole sandwich is dunked in au jus. Throw some giardiniera on it, and goodness gracious, heaven. Different because it's purposefully soggy, but damn, with au jus though. Actually they ship the Italian beef kits. I've had one. Really good. Might get one for the Super Bowl. I've been there. The worst sandwich I've ever had. I was canoeing in the Boundary Waters. We landed for lunch on a windy beach on the Canadian side of the lake we were on, and cooked powdered eggs on English muffins. The wind blew the pan onto the ground as the eggs were cooking, and we were too hungry to not eat it, so we ate sandy egg sandwiches. When I was in the 2nd grade, my class took a field trip to the Science Museum. I purchased a souvenir pencil from the gift shop that had a clear plastic tube filled with tiny little rock and mineral specimens, capped off by an eraser. It was so pretty and interesting. I was so obsessed and proud of this pencil, and it wasn't going to leave my clutches. The next day at lunchtime, I wasn't risking my precious pencil to be left behind in the classroom, taking it with me to the cafeteria. I sat down and unpacked my lunch from my Little the Mermaid lunchbox, getting settled in for snacks and socializing with my friends. I recall talking to the girl on my right for a little bit before returning my focus to food. First bite into my ham sandwich was gritty. Chewing and crunching, it tasted off. For some reason, I kept eating, trudging through the sandwich, although I had probably never finished a whole one before in my scrawny life. The entire time, I was thinking how weird and sandy it tasted. Only after I polished it out and was packing my lunchbox back up did I notice my beloved new pencil sitting there empty of all of its little stones. The eraser was gone. Obviously had released the contents. I looked all around my table and seat, in the floor, and there was not a single speck, not even the eraser, as if it could have just fallen out. Only then did I realize that I had eaten my rock. I tried to act like nothing was wrong, trashing the remaining pencil part of the pencil to hide the evidence. I was overcome with embarrassment, loss, and extreme anxiety that those were poison, and I was going to die soon. Only later as an adult did I realize that the bows on the other side of me must have rearranged my sandwich while my back and focus were turned to my friend. I wonder if they remember feeding rocks to the smug dumb girl. This caused memories. Every time we went somewhere for the day, like Great America or the beach, my dad would want to buy Subway and store it in a cooler for lunchtime. And one time, we went to Indiana Dunes, and we got sandwiches on the way there, and somehow before I even took my first bite, there was sand in my sandwich and I was big mad. I was also made to eat it because we didn't have other food. So when I was very young, like kindergarten age, I had this phase where I ate nothing but grilled cheese every meal. Well, one day I'm having my lunch grilled cheese at home, and I don't remember the details, but something must have been getting excavated put at my house, and somehow some sand from that got into my sandwich, probably from my hands, and then I didn't have a grilled cheese for probably 6 to 12 months after that. Unless making a grilled cheese, I can't handle the crappy white bread that mushes to the roof of your mouth nasty and can't hold anything together. Grilled cheese is the exception. BC the toast ones hold everything together and eliminated the mush. I got turned off white bread as a child when I had a stomach bout and could only eat and throw up again. White bread and cottage cheese, apparently, they don't impose this nonsense on modern children now. I buy white bread buns, like hot dogs and hamburger. But I only buy whole wheat sandwich bread, and the grainier the better. I'm basically looking for whatever loaf has the most bit stuck to it, texture and flavor. And it's healthier.